The Fire Store, equipping protectors with passion. Every decision the Fire Store makes as a company is about its customers. As the holiday season has quickly approached, explore a wide selection of unique and practical gifts at the Fire Store's Gift Center. Find the perfect presents for firefighters, EMTs, and first responders today. The Fire Store's goal is to get you the gear you need when you need it at prices you can afford. Visit thefirestore.com for everything but the truck and shop its family of brands including Streamlight, MSA, Lion, Fleer, and more.
Welcome back to another episode of Main Street Firefighting, a podcast by Fire Engineering. My name is Lex Shady, and with me is my partner, Chris Tobin. Before we get started, we'd again like to thank Fire Engineering for the opportunity and you all for tuning in. Tonight we're joined by Battalion Chief Coorley Moore with the Moore Fire Department in Oklahoma. Likely better known to all of you as the Firehouse Vigilance Guy, Coorley utilizes his platform to fight complacency in the fire service, and we wanted to pick his brain on how he fights complacency related to understanding building construction. We always enjoy talking to Coorley, and he handed out some awesome training nuggets you can easily implement with your crews. We hope you enjoy. Coorley, thanks again for coming on. I know you're super busy with your own stuff, but we're excited for this conversation tonight to be able to kind of pick your brain on legacy building construction issues in a different aspect, maybe in an area that doesn't necessarily have them, but may have to respond and be good at working in them. So before we get started, I'm pretty sure most of the fire service knows who you are, but can you give us a quick intro for those who may have not seen your stuff?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here, excited for the discussion. You guys heard my reservations on talking about legacy buildings. We'll get into that. But no, I'm Coorley Moore. I've been a firefighter with the Moore Fire Department, no relation, since 1997. Currently a battalion chief in charge of C shift, the green shift. And we don't have battalions per se, but they call us battalion chiefs because we just have the one battalion in our jurisdiction. The Firehouse Vigilance I started in 2018, and it is my never-ending fight against complacency. And from that came the weekly scrap, and we just celebrated our 220th episode.
That's awesome.
Of the weekly scrap. So that's where most people know me from, is the weekly scrap. So I'm excited to be here, and that's it. That's me.
Congrats. That's a lot of work. I know what we have to do for this podcast. I can't imagine doing the weekly stuff. And the stuff you're putting out for the fire service is awesome. I mean, getting some of those voices out there that people don't necessarily get to hear unless they're able to travel to conferences, that's a good opportunity for them. So for us, speaking for the fire service, we really appreciate everything you're doing. But so you talked a little bit about Moore, which is ironic, by the way. I think that's pretty cool. You work for a fire department in the same name. But can you give us a little bit about the culture of your department, maybe the building stock, any kind of specific tactics you may use? What's your response like for a fire, that kind of thing?
Sure thing. Basically, Moore's been around 100 years, but really, it was a bedroom community that supported Tinker Air Force Base and the GM plant in the area up until probably the 1980s. That's all it was just a bedroom community. It had very little Main Street. It had a Main Street, but it was very little what you would call Main Street firefighting or buildings of any sort. Almost everything in it, I don't think it's unique. I think it's I hate to put a percentage on it, but I think there's quite a bit of percentage of jurisdictions, departments, cities that are like mine, that they've basically blown up since the 1960s. And we don't have very many legacy buildings inside my city limits. And we're 27 square miles, 4 stations, 75 line personnel, about an 85-man department. So we are what I call a slice of the American fire service. We're not giant, we're not tiny. We're just kind of, I would love to tell you we're Jobtown and we just roll the fires all the time, but we don't. Mm-hmm. That's why I say we are the American fire service. And as far as response, residential fire, we get 2 engines, a ladder company. We have auto aid coming from Oklahoma City. It's going to be delayed, but it's on its way. And that's our initial response: 2 engines, 1 ladder company, a battalion chief. And then on a commercial response, we just add an engine to that.
Are you guys fire only, or do you run EMS also? Meaning, do you have transport ambulances?
No, we do not. We do not transport. It's private transport. We run, of course, all the EMS calls, and then stand around while they take the blood pressure and load them up on the ambulance.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, that's awesome.
And when needed, we'll pound on a chest, or when an actual emergency happens, we're there. Don't get me wrong, but the vast majority is what I call the EMS BS.
Yep, absolutely. So, talking about your Main Street for a little bit, I'm gonna make an assumption. It's kind of like most of the main streets. You might have like do you have like a town square, or is it like a linear strip of buildings? Kind of describe that for us.
I would say that to call it a main street and what most people think of is a misnomer.
Okay.
Like there are many better examples of a main street. We don't have any taxpayers.
Okay.
It's a collection of strip malls. I don't even think any true masonry is left in the downtown area.
Cool.
It is all type. If it is type 3, it's tilt up. That's been
the
renovated, and most of it's type 5, and it's just. There's no residentials above any of the storefronts or anything like that. So
okay.
Almost all of it is one story. There may be a few 2 stories mixed in.
Is a lot of your stuff 1 story there just because of your weather, like tornado stuff, or is that?
I don't know if that played into it. I know at one time they had an ordinance in the city that was just recently lifted that you could not have a building over 3 stories. In fact, over 2 stories, and the few 3 stories that we had were the exceptions, and everybody in town knew them. Now that's been lifted over the last, I'd say 20 years as we've gone through this boom growth. We went. I guess I could finish that part up. We went from this bedroom community, and we've completely transformed into a bedroom community that's mixed heavy. Big box retail.
Okay.
And so that's what drives us now is we have hardly any industrial section anymore, and it is mainly bedroom and
you're the shopping center
retail.
For the area.
Yes. Cool. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
With I-35 running right down the middle.
Okay. So for the listeners, you kind of hit on this in the beginning, but after describing your town, that was when we called you and asked about legacy buildings. You gave us your reservations about it. You're like, I don't have any, right? But you respond to them, right? In towns and area, if you're going mutual aid, your guys are gonna go to them, correct?
Yes.
So
correct.
That's why we wanted to pick your brain, because not only did you describe like we would say, like a typical American Service Fire Department, but you're describing a typical American Service fire response also. Some of these towns might have some of those taxpayer buildings. For those that don't remember, that's the commercial on the first floor, apartments above. But they might have, like a handful, like you said, but then they go to the next town over and they have them. And so that definitely makes this that, what is it? What's the saying? High risk, low frequency event for you guys, right?
Yeah.
So that's even more so why you need to train on them. So we're just going to jump right into it. How do you get your members even remotely interested in it when they're like, well, my first due doesn't have that? What do you do for that?
Well, I think that to say that I can get them interested in it would be misleading, but that doesn't mean that the effort isn't there.
Right.
And I think a big part of it for me, and this is, as I travel the country and I speak, people often ask me about tactics specifically. Mm-hmm. And I tell people I don't teach on tactics because I'm spoiled. I'm very spoiled in the fact that I live in Moore, Oklahoma. We deal with tornadoes. We have no basements. We're a river bottom. So there's no basements here. Everything was built after 1960. We have no balloon frame. I already mentioned the fact that we have no legacy buildings. So I'm very spoiled in my bread and butter tactics until I leave my jurisdiction, of course.
Right.
And so, but to say all that, I don't say, I'm not shy of talking about the tactics we use. I'm very confident in our tactics and the tactics we train on. But there's so many people that are better out there to speak on those things. And those are the people I go and listen to.
Right.
Now, I take notebooks upon notebooks upon notebooks and notes and bring them back. And we do a thing called Tactical Tuesday, but we also tactics talk. And my guys roll their eyes sometimes. Oh, here we go again. She's doing a tactics talk. And at first I had big reservations about actually doing this, even in my own department, because I didn't want to come across like, because they know me. They know we don't go to these buildings and we're not burning down, taxpayers or dealing with 100-year-old commercial buildings that were built in the 1920s or earlier. And so for me to come in there and say, here's the tactical considerations, and these are all the things you should be thinking about. At first I had massive reservations about saying, I've never done this, but I'm teaching you. But then I realized that's the reason I go to all these conferences. That's the reason I take all of these notes, is so that I can come back and say, hey, this is what I learned. I didn't experience it yet. I'm not saying it like this is the fight I had at this bowling alley down there on 2nd Street,
right?
But these are the considerations we need to be thinking about as a crew when we go out there and train. These are the things we need to be thinking about and processing away. And so hopefully, in my mind at least, whenever we do have that low frequency event, it's in the back of their mind. And they're saying, oh yeah, on that tactics talk, we talked about, this. or insert whatever the consideration was.
It at least
But as
gives
far
them
as
a place to
go ahead.
start. At least gives them a place to start, right? Like when they look at something, they can say that Chief, maybe they don't necessarily remember what it was exactly, but they're like, Chief pointed that out, and that was important. So I'm going to
Right
pay
on.
attention
No, it's
to
like,
that.
for a perfect example, the last one we did was fast food restaurants. Fast food restaurants, I told them, I said, here's my expectation on a fast food restaurant. Once we know that the life hazard is taken care of in there, which is generally speaking pretty easy to find out. It's a defensive fire. If we're fighting any sort of conditions inside, it's defensive. Unless we can walk in and put water on it, we're not doing any sort of interior ops on a fast food restaurant. Plain and simple. And I just wanted to set that expectation for it, and put everybody on the same page.
Absolutely.
And that's the same type of thing for other considerations. And hopefully, day of, that's stuck in their brain.
Absolutely. Have you guys that you can remember responded to any memorable fires in older buildings, either in Moore or mutual aid?
Man, I don't know if we've had any just monstrously. We've done a lot of good auto aid fires down to Norman. Norman's our town to the south, and if you know, follow college football, it's the college town. It's
Okay.
OU, and they've been around for quite some time and have a lot of old buildings. But I think most of, especially the ones I've been involved in, have been their apartment fires, and,
Okay.
it's garden style apartments with breezeways that have been the ones I remember and file away.
Those are those are challenging enough. They can be.
But nothing specific as far as the 100-year-old, the legacy, that's. But this was I don't know if I made the point, but I'll belabor it here, which is that's the reason I don't teach tactics. I teach mindset,
Right.
because mindset is really the key to whenever that low frequency, high risk event comes up. And so the mindset for me and my battalion, my crews are, I want them to take the basics and take them off the table. I want them to be so good at the basics that whenever the low risk, high frequency event does come up, the basics aren't eating up their bandwidth. Stretching hose, throwing ladders, flowing water are all things that we are so proficient at. Those things eat up no bandwidth, and you have so much more bandwidth left to start making decisions and making tactical. And it all starts with mindset. And that the mindset has to be, I'm going to be so good at these things so that it's not if, but when it is needed, because it is low frequency. It is. When it is needed, we're going to be very good at it.
So,
and if you can get them into that mindset, you can throw almost anything at them and say, let's work on this. Let's work on this.
All right. So you hit on a couple things. First off, your big platform that you have is based around complacency, right? That's kind of
absolutely
like that's your, if you had a mission statement, that I think would be in there somewhere. So
yes, sir.
That's why you're the perfect guy for this episode, right? So we've been to numerous places that that mirror your environment, right? It was the post World War II suburban blow up community, right? And it's always the same story, as we don't fight fire in those buildings. And I go, you're right, you don't, but I bet you the postcard community next door to you does. It's a college town, and it's always the case. It's always a college town, and they got old building stock, and then that's some automatic aid or mutual aid. So while there's a bunch of the fire service that has no premise of legacy firefighting in like a main street or just a type 3 taxpayer, I have yet to go to anywhere really, aside from like the Southwest, like way Southwest, or just like anywhere Oklahoma and East. I've never been to where someone just does not respond to those buildings in some form or fashion. You know what I mean? To where it's just like it's not on the table. It's not in the cards. Like it's the only thing that we're really talking about is frequency. In your case, it's a low frequency. In some others, it's a high frequency. And that's really the difference. Not necessarily what's in your town and what isn't in your town. So once again, like that plays right into why does complacency happen? Well, it's generally frequency of the event. In this case, we're talking about something that a lot of your department doesn't get to do a lot of, but then all of a sudden tomorrow, you yourself could be in control of one on a mutual aid. Your department could be sending a RIT team in on that on a mutual aid. So, or maybe just actually numerous pieces, and then you're going to be in the actual firefight and all sorts of stuff. But once again, like that's why we really like to get your insight and perspective of places like yours to see how you get the buy-in. But I can also throw in my own experience from starting on a very small not, and your place isn't small, a much smaller place than your city of Moore, which they probably had a fire on Main Street once a decade, maybe once every 2 decades. So that was the prevailing kind of, why do we need to mess with those? We kind of know all about them. And then, so I've seen that, and then I've seen what happens when I've been on an apartment like that has a fire in those buildings. Also, the biggest, most common one, kind of what we're talking about in this big complacency kind of mindset, is departments that have automatic aid or mutual aid RIT teams or FAST teams that come from like the neighboring community over, and they never get into the other communities' buildings for walkthroughs.
Right.
Because so now all of a sudden you have, due to manpower, no one has enough of that, right? So all of a sudden now you have
everybody's overflowing.
Right. So now you're calling that
Right.
that RIT team or whatever, that FAST team from the neighboring department, who it's a separate kingdom and y'all don't gel together except on fires. So, and they don't ever, you don't ever train with them. That's the point here. Like, you never have them in your town to walk through your buildings. Now all of a sudden that's your RIT team. Like, how terrible of an idea is that, right? So
Absolutely.
When's the last time anyone went to someone else's community and did a walkthrough in someone else's buildings? Because if you go to them on fires, like it or not, those are your buildings. It doesn't
you're
matter.
absolutely right.
It doesn't matter what the side of the truck says. If you have a mutual aid agreement or automatic aid agreement, those are your buildings. So, and I think a lot of people, especially in the volunteer communities, really, really miss that. And unfortunately, it's a lot of egos that get in the way. We don't play with this department well, and they don't and they'll bypass departments to get other departments, and that's just, at the end of the day, no one wants to hear that when the suits and briefcases show up after a bad day. So
You're not wrong.
So kind of going on.
And the worst part is, sorry,
No,
go
no,
ahead,
no.
Lex.
Go ahead.
No, I said even worse than because what you're saying is absolutely 100% spot on. We have to get any place we could respond. We need to go get eyes on it, especially those target hazards, especially those ones that we all know. We all drive past and say, "Wow, I hope that never burns." Right.
Right.
When you're just driving through your local communities, but even worse is our own. I mean, I'm saying is that the problem is even systemic and endemic in the fact that it is. So many places don't even do walkthroughs in their own districts, let alone doing what's even necessary to in a neighboring. If that makes
no,
I
Absolutely.
firmly
we
believe
get that.
that.
My favorite,
I firmly believe that.
my favorite excuse. I mean, I could have a list of my favorite one is, well, I grew up in this town.
Right.
That's my favorite one. I'm like, man, awesome. I'm like, let's go to the building right now, and you're gonna see what it's change as it, like, you don't walk through it on a yearly basis. You have no idea the candle shop is now a florist, or vice versa. Oh, by the way, they're making pottery in the basement now. I bet you didn't know about that kiln they stuck back there. Like everything, right? So like, the fact that you've existed in a space has no correlation to knowledge about specific buildings. It just does not.
I'm telling you, 97 to now, like 27 years roughly. I've worked in Moore. I grew up in Moore. I know Moore. You know what I'm saying? If someone's going to make that excuse, it's me. And every time we do a walkthrough, there is something I find out about the interior of a building where I'm like, I had no idea this was this cut up. I had no idea there was this fire load. I had no idea they had done this to the interior.
You know what? I tell you what, man. One department I can throw out there is an awesome, amazing exception to the little stuff we're talking about would be up in Oregon. Astoria, Oregon. Astoria. Holy cow! That whole department they can be like certified historians.
It was
of those buildings.
The level they knew.
That's
the
awesome.
But check this out. If anyone knows anything about Astoria, Oregon, that town literally burned from the bottom up because they have a subterranean tunnel system underneath that town, and they have pre-drilled nozzle pipe entrances in the floors of some of their buildings. So it's like it's not even like a hydrant. It's just a hole in the floor that they can pop a cap off of and insert the nozzle pipe down, the Bresner distributor down into the buildings. So
so this is just in the culture of the entire city.
The whole city.
Town.
So that's why, and this is forever ago that these fires happened. And the city sits on top of a combustible labyrinth of tunnels. So if the fire department knows everything about that main street and the old buildings, because it's just crazy. So that was the one place where we were just like, wow, like these guys are definitely got it going on. We
Right.
we
No, that's
learned
part of their
way
culture. It's just
more
the
from
way it
them
is.
about their buildings. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very interesting experience because, like you said, normally you go and we'll do like a walkthrough type thing, and people will ask us
Right.
questions, and sometimes we'll know, a lot of times we won't because stuff is so endemic to the area. There's so many unique things, but man, every time someone asks, if we didn't have an answer, one of the historic guys would pop up and be like, "Oh yeah, this goes to this place. This was renovated in this year. They do that." Like they had an answer for every single question. It was impressive.
And I mean, I think it just goes to show you, like, but the point where, like, the thing that they had that most cities don't was an element of destruction with fire, right? If that
Right.
wasn't, that was a catalyst of it, it kind of fostered a culture of, like, wow, this is important, because, I mean, if you go back and look up the story of fire, I think there was 2 of them, actually. It should be a movie, the way the fires happened, yeah.
So
And that's the thing about the fire service. We're so reactive, and I mean this in a good way, bad way. I mean, Rick Klasky talks about it quite a bit in the fact of knowing the history. It's like all of us did fire drills in school when we were kids. We never knew why. We just all go stand out in the front yard, and they say, "Okay, everybody go back." You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But that's everything like that is directly tied to a tragedy. Just like Our Lady of Angels is the whole reason we have the school drills now.
Yeah.
And there's so many things like that. Some of them national wise. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory or the
Yep.
in New York and all the building code changes that came from it. We're very reactive when there's a tragedy. And so that sounds like Astoria. It's a tragedy that stuck forever,
Yeah.
but it's so localized that we need that mindset everywhere.
So kind of going
yeah,
off of that, what do you do in your department for building construction? Do you guys get out and walk through your buildings or in the buildings of the neighboring towns? What kind of like training? How do you build that mindset and that culture into Moore?
Love it. Great question. So, first of all, everything I do, I steal from people. Okay, so if you've caught my classes, I reference Lex and I message you and say, can I use this? And I use it in my reflexive readiness class, which is find the V, find the void. I love it. I absolutely think that's fantastic. You can teach someone who knows nothing about building construction and show them a picture and say, find the V, find the void. And how valuable is that? Especially for somebody who's never swung a hammer or turned a screwdriver. So I stole that and put it in one of my classes, and of course I have a picture of Lex and say this came from her. I have Chris's. Give me a high school football team, put them in some bunker gear, and I'll put out bread and butter all day long. I love that because I caught Dare to Save, I don't know how many years ago, but that's in my 9Ls class. I love it because it talks about our citizens expect more than a high school football team showing up. Mm-hmm. And so all that being said, and I wanted to say that because I love you both, but all that being said, Chief Eric Pettaway out of Boston Fire, I've never met him, but I caught a Zoom class. It was just a Zoom call where he came in for somebody and taught for 20, 30 minutes, whatever it was, just dropped some nuggets. And I just took my notes. But one of the things he said that stuck with me, and I put it in, I think every one of my classes in some way, shape, or form, I always have a picture of him and I always do a bad Boston accent when I do it. But he said, if you want to know the number one way to take care of your crews, make sure they know their jobs, make sure they know their district.
Yeah.
Right. And I almost got too Jersey there, but not the point. Instead of Boston, but not the point. I love it because it stuck with me and I teach it everywhere I go. But in my own department, that sparked us to do a thing that's called My District Monday. And My District Monday, and I won't go into the whole reason for naming things, certain conventions, but mainly it was for consistency because we work 3 Mondays in a row on our schedule, and then we'll be off for 6 Mondays, and then we'll come back and work 3 Mondays. It's a 9-day schedule, California swing.
Yeah,
but you couldn't do stuff. You couldn't do stuff like every Monday or you couldn't base it off the tour. It was just piled up, and you couldn't get to everything. So the way we came up with this is on the last Monday. It's called My District Monday. And basically what people had to do is go out and find a target hazard in their jurisdiction, in their district, and do a walkthrough of it, and then come back and present it to the rest of the department. So it did 2 things. The first dude got eyes inside the building, did a walkthrough, measurements, hydrants, utilities, everything, man traps, looking at the construction on the inside, seeing if it's cut up, seeing the fire load, all that stuff was benefit. But not only that, man, they took picture. I'll get into how good it got. Then they come back, and by proxy, everybody else, they had to do a presentation on it. And it didn't have to be fancy. It could just be slides showing it, Google Earth showing the layout, and talking about here's what first do consideration, second, different considerations for it. It was very, very well received. The best part is, especially the young tech savvy members of the department, they started putting drones in the air. They started doing things where they'd go in and take pictures, and then they'd have like the floor plan here and then the picture beside it, and they'd have an arrow showing where the picture was being taken from. Wow. They got so fancy with it because it became a competition on who could do the best one. one of the big things we did was we actually moved through so many buildings, and it's great, man. We have this library of that. We actually went away from My District Monday because we were starting to do stuff like, not that it's a bad thing, but we were just going to 7-Eleven because we'd run out of target hazards that needed to get eyes inside.
Mhm.
Now we need to revisit it because, of course, as you know, things get renovated, occupancy change, all that sort of stuff. But it was very well received, and the competition factor was a healthy one.
Mm-hmm.
But the crew got hands-on experience with the building they're going to be responding to, and then all the other crews, the second due, third due, fourth due, all got it by proxy through the presentation. And we would do 4 of these every My District Monday because each station had to present one that day. And it was phenomenal. It was really good. Now we've switched from My District Monday. We're still doing My District Monday, but we're no longer doing the presentations because we're put that on pause and we'll revisit it. But now we're doing more district familiarization and looking at basically documenting bars on windows and going to bedroom communities right now and trying to estimate the stretch based off our pre-connect. How far should we pull past this building to estimate the stretch based on the floor plan? Because once you do, I'm sure St. Louis is much the same. Most of the bedroom communities are, once you know 1 floor plan, 2 floor plans, maybe 3, you know the whole neighborhood, especially the square footage.
Yeah,
sure.
And so those things are very, very popular. And it gives the company officer something to do when they're racking their brain trying to figure out, what can I do today? Hey, let's go do My District Monday stuff so we're ready when it comes around.
Yeah, so you hit on some of the floor plans and those kind of, man, get a information on the developer. Get a hold of the developer and go, hey, give me a list of your floor plans. What people like, what are the options when you buy into this neighborhood? What are your floor plan layouts? And then there you go. Like, you'll have all of them right there in like a professional, and then, all right,
I never even thought about that with
here's
the
option
brand
A, B,
new,
and
brand
C,
new ones.
Yeah. But anyways, also a couple things you said. I mean, man, you are definitely the rare exception on just departments that, first of all, you're not overburdened with non-fire stuff. I just going on base what I just heard. I mean, I'm hearing that you guys actually utilize your time very well, and you're not letting it run away from you like some places. Which, if you have the opportunity to do like what you're doing, that's amazing. That is awesome, because the buildings are always there, right? Like, think about all the departments or all the places where you just got firemen sitting in the firehouse, not doing anything, and then now they got to mow grass, or now they got to go relay concrete out for the parking lot, or now they're on the roof installing dish network stuff because they're trying to the boards on them to try to keep them busy.
Keep them busy, yeah. No, and I preach this, Chris, and this is something I want to say on this podcast so people can hear it. We got to get away from a culture of busyness, and we have to foster a culture of readiness.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my first couple years in the fire service on a smaller town department. Was 8 to 5 was busy time, busy. Go mow grass. Go, I mean, and the buildings are always there, right? So, like, man, it sounds like you guys have really done great things with what you're doing, with getting them out and using the buildings to kind of keep the mission mindset on the firefighting. And then, you do get a lot of crossover benefit for the other non-fire related calls. And whether it's hazmat, now you probably know where the gas and electric shutoffs are, or whether it's EMS, well, now you probably know where some certain entrances are better or not for stretchers, rear, front, that kind of stuff, right? There's everything you can get out of a building. You squeeze that information out of that community with that building stock. There's just so much you take away, and you never waste a run, right? I like how we...
And that's it, man. Never waste a run. And that mindset, man, again... Go ahead.
And no, it sounds like you kind of hit
Get me fired up.
You kind of hit on it before. The EMS calls where we're just basically waiting for the ambulance to get there. Man, like my crew already knows. Like, once the stuff stabilizes, I ride with the crew of 6. I know I'm spoiled, but like I'm looking at the building across the street, the building to the right, the left. I already kind of walked around the building we're already in if I can, So like. But after the call is over, I'll come back, and before we get on the truck, if I find something cool, I go, hey, fellas, check this out. Hey, look, there's squatters getting in this over here. Hey, have you ever seen this? Or like, so, yeah, unless it's 3 a.m, we all just need to, go back to sleep.
No, absolutely. There's a time and a place if you want to buy in.
But, yeah, absolutely. just talking about, like, utilizing the runs, even the EMS runs is fire-related information. Recon, it's all recon.
I mean, there's no other time that you're in these houses, especially the residential component. other than the EMS runs, or if you guys put in fire alarms, right? That's the other big thing. Like, we put in the smoke detectors, and some guys complain about going in, but I'm like, it's the opportunity to get in the building. Like, yeah, it might be annoying to go hang up the smoke detector for someone, but you're in the building and you can look at the layout and see if there's anything funky about it. Because we have a lot of the older buildings, they're starting to get the renovations, the layouts are different, so we think we know what it looks like until you get inside, and that's the opportunity for that.
And someone decided to throw up a party wall, or it's just a wall that has no business being anywhere inside of something that doesn't meet code,
Exactly.
Yeah, unless you've been in there, you won't know what's there.
And that's the other thing too, is like, man, if you have that department that has it's a smaller department with a fire-based EMS, and those crews are just getting smashed every day. Like the fire trucks running 1 or 2, and the ambulances are running 10 or 12. Like them, the ambulance crews, think about what they do. It's not EMS that they do more. What they do is they're inside someone's house more. So those are your scouts. That's who you really want to talk to when you're like, tell me about this part of town, or the demographic shifts, the socioeconomic behaviors. Are you starting to see daisy chaining, as in like cords under carpets and stuff? You got an influx of immigrants all of a sudden in this part of town. Like, you're going to start seeing. Those are the crews you need to start using for your building stuff, instead of just running them ragged on an ambulance and just saying, oh well, they're lesser than firemen because they're not going in fires. But what they are going in more than anyone else in the department is people's houses, and those are the ones that we just don't show up to them and be like, let's do a pre-plan of this house. That's not how that works. So
no, they're the ones who see more of the battlefield than anybody.
Absolutely. So you have to utilize them.
And the other, you said it in the very beginning, like, what do we do most of the time? EMS, right? So I'm not saying, and he's not saying that when you're on an EMS call, you don't pay attention to your patient.
No, absolutely not. Take care of the issue.
But let's be honest, you can most of the time fully pay attention to the patient and pay attention to the house. Most of the time, one of the person is talking to the patient, the other person can do a quick look around the house and see if there's anything worth noting to go back and tell the fire crew.
It's just capitalizing on the situation. And obviously, if it's a low I don't know, tier EMS run, I'll talk to the homeowner. Hey, I noticed that this is weird for this house. Why do those stairs look that way? Is this normal for you guys? All your doors open the opposite direction? Like, why does the door swing inward towards the basement? Like stuff like that. I'll ask. If I find weird things, I definitely, and more times than not, as long as you did a good job at the EMS call, they're more than happy to tell you about their house, especially when you tell them, I would like to know this information, so if this place ever is on fire, this is in your best interest. Right?
Yeah.
No, I'm telling you, there is crazy stuff you will find. Just recently, we went on a medical call, and I was not on the call, but they came back and told me. I actually went back to the homeowners to see it, but they basically took half their garage and converted it. So the front half was just like a storage area that looked like a garage from the outside. And then they had a room that was, the only way to access it was from the living room, but they built a bookcase that swung out from the wall. So it was like a hidden room. You would never be able to find that in a search if you didn't know it was there. I mean, it wasn't possible.
Yeah,
like you would just find a bookcase.
I had a friend in high school that had one of those, and behind it was an entire theater room with like a vaulted ceiling. And you would have never, like, you went down in their basement, you would never know it was back there. I can't imagine trying to find that if there was a fire.
Right.
But
low visibility and just here's a bookcase. Let's move on.
Good luck. Yeah, pull the bookcase out.
It's not, the garage isn't converted because the front doors were still on it.
Right.
You know?
So you would never know.
Right.
So kind of keep going off of this. What are some specific issues you've seen in regards to training related to building construction? Maybe not necessarily the legacy, but just kind of in general, especially with recruits and maybe some new people on your department. What are some issues you've seen, and maybe what are some things that you guys have tried to do to overcome those?
And phenomenal question, because it's a problem facing the entire fire service, and that's who we're hiring now. This is not a knock on. This isn't an attack on generations. That's not what this is. But my son is 2 years on Oklahoma City, and he is the new generation, and he didn't grow up doing construction like I did. He just didn't. Even our lawnmower, he grew up starting by pulling the handle and punching the button because it was a battery powered lawnmower.
Right.
And we had a small yard, and that's what we had. And so he never really pull started any tools, we are hiring people now who've never swung a hammer, never turned a screwdriver, never pulled wire, never slung tile, never hung sheetrock, never framed a house, never roofed a house. And that's not a knock. That was just that used to be where we hired from as a general rule. The blue collar trades is where we used to hire from. But that's not where our standard firefighter stock is coming from now. And so the biggest issue is just a lack of general knowledge of how things are put together and how they function. And that's not a knock on them. That's not a knock. It's just not valued in society as much as it used to be.
Yeah,
and
so
that's a shift in societal values.
Sure, yeah. I mean, and you just explained. I don't think there's anyone in the fire service that doesn't have that. I don't know if it's called a problem, but it just doesn't have that environment
challenge.
It's a
challenge.
change.
Yeah, that burden kind of going on. So I guess now, do you think that the way building instruction is modeled for education, especially in like the new member or the fire academies, we'll call it like the red books or whatever? Do you think that's an antiquated model, because that was designed for teaching people like you and I in our generation?
Right.
That's not who the message hasn't changed, but the target audience has changed, right? They don't even grasp. So now, what would be considered, basic elements of building instruction to me and you are now way over their heads. So I don't know, maybe they dial it back even more. I'm not really sure how you do that.
I mean, he's asking you this, but I can kind of answer it from my point of view. I, am a little older, in my 30s. I'm not the Gen X or whatever. I'm not the news people coming in, but I had no idea about building construction, right? So I got that red textbook, and I think my version still actually had the word rafter in it, but I had no idea what that was, right? And so I think, to answer my point of the question, I think it is antiquated, because I know people who know way less. They don't even understand what drywall is. They just walk in the room and see the wall is painted. They don't know what it's called. So how do we expect them to learn anything when we're not actually? You have to dive into what a building is and talk about all the parts.
No, to become an expert, absolutely. You are absolutely correct.
I think to even understand for our level.
That blows my mind, Lex, that you were ignorant of building. I figured you were always into it.
No, I had no idea. I figured
you had like a carpenter father or something that made you go along on jobs.
I had my very first fire. I was doing a search, and there was fire where I had no idea why it was there, how it got there, and it was a basement fire, and I was above it, and I was like, I should probably understand how that works so I don't get myself in a jam. And then I just started studying, right? And then I like it, and it was a subject that was easy to talk about and I thought was important. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of people talking about it. And I've always worked in an area where there's older buildings, so that's kind of where it took off from there. But yeah, I had no idea. So I can totally say that I think the way we teach building construction is antiquated for the newer generation coming in, because I know some of them know less than I did. And I didn't know very much.
Yeah, I mean...
and I think... Go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry. The big thing is, too, just going back, it is, like, give me a building instruction book that won't put you to sleep.
That's it. I was going to bring up the point.
Boring. It is boring.
Yeah.
All of them...
So dry. So
dry. And until you give them a reason of, like, man, this is really important, I'm not really. That's just straight up friggin' education psychology, right? Like if they're not solving a problem or understanding why this is important to them, dude, it's going to be a tough buy-in, And they might hear the first 17 words out of your mouth, but they're not going to hear the next hour, After that, they're going to be checked out. Not to mention we have to talk about attention spans here too. So
right.
I don't know if you.
Yeah.
I don't know if it needs to turn into like some like building instruction like Instagram version or some I don't know what needs to happen, but man, it's going to be a tough challenge, because now the candles burn on both ends, right? We have a generation that doesn't need to know why they need to know this stuff, and one that can't stay focused long enough to learn anything. So.
And the two pillars of the fire service, I don't think anybody ever argues this, is understanding fire behavior and then understanding building construction. Those two things are so important to understand where the fire's at, where it's going, and what's going to happen next.
What's funny is that I think that the people understand that, and yet we're still not studying that.
Do
you know what I mean? Like everybody knows that, but we're not. That's not what we're studying, because it's not flashy.
Go to any conference right now and then look and see what rooms are full and what rooms are empty, and it's going to blow your mind. And you'll see you'll start to connect the dots and go, yeah, wow. Like people are making a choice to take the edutainment and not the thing that maybe will save them or someone else's lives one day.
Yeah. And does art imitate life? Does life imitate art? And that whole question of chicken and the egg. But it's definitely a problem no matter what. It's kind of full circle back to Astoria or Our Lady of Angels. And I love Jay Bonifield. I love Aaron Fields. I love them both. And both of them talk about the moment they had when they were in a fire and the stuff that they'd been taught didn't work.
Oh yeah.
And that was what born, for Aaron Fields. That was the birth of Nozzle Forward eventually. That was him digging in and saying, hey, this stuff didn't work. But that's the Astoria moment, that massive fire back in history, or that Our Lady of Angels, and now we have, but most people don't have that moment. And Lex had hers above a basement going, maybe I should understand this. Maybe she wasn't jammed up and in a life or death situation, but you had that epiphany, and that changed the course of your career.
Absolutely.
Most people never get that moment. And so how do we combat that and get that mindset to where we need to understand this stuff? And to your point about the Instagram teaching, I think there's a lot of value in that. I think that we have to get away. We almost have to get, everybody says start with why. I think you got to get back behind building construction and say start with the purpose. Like, what is the purpose of a building? Why do we build them the way we build them? Once you understand the why the building is built that way, then you can start getting into the different nuances of this is, metal studs versus wood studs versus tilt up versus old school masonry, and what the differences is, because back then they couldn't do it this way. And so that's the reason. But ultimately, it's the purpose of a building. What is the purpose?
Sure.
And if you get into their heads, the purpose is just to stand up. That's the whole purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
And gravity and fire are trying to make it not do that.
Everything you see on a building is doing one or two things, right? It's holding something up or holding something out. That's it.
Yep.
Everything else, other than the paint on the walls, it's either holding something up or it's holding something out. It's a shingle, a siding, and then everything else is a structural member doing.
So do you think?
And the people who are building them are trying to do it as cheaply as possible.
Oh,
right,
absolutely.
They're not, and I hate the saying that they're out there trying to kill you. They're not. They're really
they're not.
They're not. But they also, the world we live in, everything's expensive, so they have to make it as affordable as possible. They're not doing
and fire
it on
isn't the
purpose.
primary consideration when they're doing it. It's a hassle they have to put up with.
Yeah, they're concerned.
I gotta meet code.
Keeping the rain out and the walls standing together. That's their concern. But
yes.
So kind of going off all of this, we're talking about how building construction is so local, right? So maybe that's where, and the fire service maybe doesn't want to hear it, but maybe we need to take the burden off of the fire academy, especially if there's not a local one to your department, and the department itself needs to take accountability for the building construction for their members, because they have to teach what's endemic to their area. Like, you hammering in old buildings isn't necessarily super useful for you to a point, but not a ton. Where my district, I don't have we have a few new buildings and new shopping centers. We have a Costco, right? But 95% of my buildings are old buildings. So I need to talk about that.
Yeah, if I focused on old buildings, I would lose buy-in very rapidly on the attention spans of the younger.
So kind of going,
not just the new people,
in general.
not younger,
Well, in general, even your old guys aren't going to want to listen.
The people I'm trying to teach, I should say.
Yeah. So kind of going back to the original question when we started this, what do you guys do for your building construction training?
Man, initially we have an academy in the city, and there is a day where our training chief drives around with them and shows them, especially stuff we've had big burns on before. We had a pretty massive church fire, but they tore it down. But they take them to the site where the new church has been built, and they walk them through it. And then they also go to we had a pretty good strip mall that got away from its wind-driven event, and it had a lot of pretty pictures with a lot of orange stuff. And but they go there and they do that. But then that they take them to the different sections of our city that kind of grew up in different eras, and they talk about, and by eras I mean since the 1960s. So please bear. We have our 800-foot Fox boxes that are just stacked up, and then you got your more you move on into the 90s and getting into the 1,500 or 2,500 square foot neighborhoods. So when I say eras, I don't mean classically speaking eras.
So you just hit on an architectural fingerprint or an endemic kind of characteristic, which you just said the word Fox boxes, right?
I was going to ask about that.
I guarantee you nobody outside Texas and Oklahoma will know what you just said there.
What if?
So,
that's a solid point.
It goes to show you, the architectural fingerprint, it changes. It's so endemic, man. And every place has one. I don't care where you're at. Every town in this country has something that is unique about its buildings, and until you go and start really looking at all these, have something to reference, right, and compare, you can't see them. And then all of a sudden, if you see enough of them, they start sticking out at you, and you're like, whoa, this whole town has second floor balconies, everything. That's weird, so why? And then the next question is why is that? Well, that would affect a couple things like laddering and all, so but I'm just using that as an example. But back to your your jargon there, that is not only that's more than just an element on a building. That's a term, right?
Yes.
So just as endemic as Boston's or New England's triple deckers. So
Yeah.
And that stuff right there you got to find and capitalize on. That kind of thing right there. Hey, younger people new to the fire service. This is what's in our area that most people don't have that we do have, and this is why you need to know about that, because this is kind of where we have the uniqueness that we need to kind of specialize on. What that Fox box is, those types of homes, and then what does the future look like for anyone living in one of those. So
right on. No, and I'm with Lex. The current teaching model is antiquated, just on so many levels, but especially when it comes to building construction. And then Chris hit on it beautifully when he said, I can't think of any. Maybe hazmat might be more boring subject than building construction. I'm not. I know you guys are building construction gurus, so please don't take offense.
Oh, not at all. We fully admit it's boring.
But that's why you have to make it
immersive. Talking about
loads
and impact loads and snow loads
and
wind loads.
It's terrible.
Enough with the loads.
Yeah, right. And I mean, like, it's so boring. It's so hard to remember, but you have to immerse them. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. When you have your members on duty flying drones above buildings, man, it's think about it, like you've now injected an element of entertainment into the learning, which is great. On the front end.
I'm telling you, those kids with the tech. I mean, they're impressive when they get their fire lit. They're impressive with what they can do when you can unleash their creativity.
Man, when they're happy to learn like that. I mean, just look at the product it's produced. That's freaking awesome, right?
And they're gonna remember it.
Yeah, and they're gonna remember it. It's not gonna just be some pre-planned Xerox into a binder on the truck. Remember, everyone used to have the pre-planned binders. Never would ever be opened up again. As if like they were just the chief was gonna show up and open it up on the buggy.
Magically,
like, what are we doing
green
here?
sheets we had to fill out.
Right. Like, what are we doing?
Well, and I like what you said about you take one truck and you send it to the building, because I'm sure we can all say we've been a part of where you have multiple apparatus doing a walkthrough, and what happens is like maybe the first crew with whoever's walking you through the building gets the information and pays attention, and every other truck is walking in the back talking about the football game, screwing around, disappearing in a hallway, but they're not paying attention, right? So but what you guys have done is you've instilled they have to invest not only their time to learn for themselves, but they better do a good job because they're in charge of teaching everyone else. And I really like that idea.
Yeah, that puts them on the spot. I mean, if you want to bust someone's ego, you put them in front of a room.
Yeah.
No, and there's nervous. It's fun to see different company officers handle it in different ways. Sometimes a company officer gets up and he does the presentation and he gets his crew to buy in. Some of the better leaders, and some of the company officers are like, "No, the lowest guy's doing it. You're gonna get up there and do it." And it's just, I'm not saying there's a right way or a wrong way. I think each one has its benefits and its drawbacks. There's always a dichotomy, but it's fun to see, and the ownership is really powerful. And don't get me wrong, I've had a lot of goofy ideas that don't work, and I try. I mean, that's why I say my crews. No, they got me. They're rolling their eyes like, okay, here goes Chief Moore with another goofy idea. Please, but that one, the My District Monday was a very, very successful project.
I like that a lot.
I'd have to go back and look at the folder because we took them all and we put them on the server, the city server, so that any crews on any shift could go and access them. Not just my shift and my battalion.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you need to do a class called "Making Construction Cool Again." I actually have it's in the reflexive readiness. It's where the Find the V, Find the Void has been plugged in. But it's I was going to make it was called I think it was called Sex and Drugs and Building Construction. There you go. Yeah.
That was going to be the name of the class, and the very first slide was like, "There's no sex, there's no drugs, there's just a whole bunch of nerdy building construction," and that's where but I'm not a subject matter expert on it. I like the slides I use. In fact, I took what I built and it's in my reflexive readiness class. And it's where I plugged in your Find the V, Find the Void bit. But anyway, I am a nerd for it.
I mean, so here's the thing, man. It's like we're not engineers. We don't have degrees in architecture. We didn't go to trade school. And we talk about a niche in the building construction subject that is... It's almost, if you think you're just going to be an expert at looking at a 120-year-old enigma of a building that's changed 19 times.
Yeah,
and 18 of those times you have no idea how it changed. Like, we say, I don't know more than we say we know when it comes to what we're looking at, because it's a Da Vinci Code. It's beautiful. So we are like the farthest from experts at these older buildings.
Well, and like
we've picked up on some nuances. We've picked up on some patterns, some trends, and we've definitely done a lot of research. But other than that, like there's always a decent amount of the pie graph that is an unknown, and that no one can know that is alive today because it's just a weird artifact in the environment.
Well, and we tell people all the time, like, no one cares what the actual weight load of, a wall or a beam or a column is. No one cares, right? Like, there's some engineer and there's some instructor out there that knows it all and they care, and that's fantastic. I have other things that I need to put in my brain other than that because I don't need it on a fire, right? We teach firemanship level building construction. We teach what you need to know at a fire and how to react to it if it's on fire or if there's a fire near it or whatever. That's what we talk about. So we're like you said, we're definitely not experts by any means. There's people that know way more about it than we do, but we just do the street level because that's what people need. They don't need the extra. That's just fun knowledge, right? That's not necessary.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
but you guys are. I want you to know this. You guys are the experts. I really do mean that.
Oh no.
So, I mean, whether that's a scary fact. Or
I think we just got you fooled. That's all.
Yeah.
You should be proud of it.
And that's the thing is, like, anyone can be where we're at. I'm like, anyone. It just takes research time and a lot of hours walking down. Like I said, like we try not to fly. We drive. Is anything under 10 hours? We stop every and then to look at the main streets and to study, to take pictures, and then that's how we start to pick up on patterns and stuff. Because if you're not comparing 20 main streets to each other, you're never going to pick out the nuances, and that's where we've really started to capitalize on some stuff that's just not in the books.
And it's funny because there's a couple routes that we go on pretty consistently back and forth to Ohio. We do quite a few conferences and stuff out there, and so there's some of the towns that we stop in consistently. Like every year, we stop in the same town and get coffee, and every year we notice something different about that town, right? But the only reason we even notice it is because we're paying attention. We're taking 10 extra minutes to just look around. This is like paying attention to building construction is a deliberate thing, right? You have to put in a little bit of effort to just take in your environment. But then once you start doing it, it gets very easy. The beginning is hard because you may not know what you're looking at. But once you start picking it out, then it gets easier every time. And like you said, then you start picking up the nuances of one city to another because you've done it so much that it's just like second nature.
Yeah. So and then you jump out to say we go from one coast to another. We'll jump from like a place out in like Pennsylvania or something.
Well, we just did it this year. We were in Virginia one month, and the next month we were in Oregon.
Yeah. So and then you really get to see. You're like, whoa! Like if people knew how far apart and different these are two main streets, but obviously the Pacific Northwest, almost everything's wood, very little brick. Opposite end of the spectrum over here in Virginia. Right now we got hurricanes and stuff like that, and the buildings are a lot of masonry, not so much wood. But we get like having to be able to see that in the same 7 days period, and to take pictures and compare them. But it all takes practice, right? And then.
Right. It's not going to happen on accident.
No. So, but I mean, anyone can do this on a small level, and anyone that travels around can just do this. Like we never turn the fire switch off. Like we never punch out. Like we might not be at work, but man, everything we look at, even when we're just on our day off buying a Christmas tree or something, like we look at all the buildings as if they're on fire. They're just not burning yet. And It does, and that just never goes away. And I think most firemen, even yourself, are like that. Whether they realize or not, but they just are. I think most firemen walk into a building and they size it up in their head and they don't even know they're doing it, which is a good place to be, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's where you
without a doubt.
Be. So you've kind of answered some of our questions on training and stuff, but what are some things regarding like safety culture? Do you see, and maybe it's not an issue in your area, but regarding kind of the safety, hands-off buildings mindset, do you see that being an issue with some building construction stuff? This may be more related to legacy buildings, but do you see that an issue in your area?
Well, I think we touched on it a little bit with just the why would I need to do that? I grew up here type complacent. I think complacency is the number one problem in the American Fire Service, be it in regards to training, in regards to realistic training, education. I'm trying to think of the right word to use. Education and staying up to speed on what the latest information is. Or if we're talking about building construction, just even if you said, man, I know all about, I built that building 30 years ago, man, it's staying up to speed on what is it being used for now and what's changed since it was built.
Right.
And it really is it's complacency. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but that really is the problem of when people say, well, we've always done it this way, or why would I need to do that? It's the same thing as saying, why would I need to stretch a pre-connect? I've done it 100 times.
Man. Yeah.
Yep.
No.
It's the complacency. So it really, and for me, it goes right back to, and I hate, like I said, broken record, but mindset. If you can, and the power of language, man, is so important. And I wish more people understood how powerful language is. And that's why I love Find the V, Find the Void. I love Dare to Save. Because it's language and it's powerful and it conveys the message like instantly what you're talking about. And language is powerful. We have a mantra on C Shift, and it's start call smooth, finish call strong. And I actually, for Christmas one year, I bought everybody a Taylor's 10 that said Green Shift 2021, start call smooth, finish call strong.
Great company, by the way.
Yeah.
Fantastic company.
Love that.
Love it. Don't know if I can even mention Taylor's 10s, but not the point.
You can. Absolutely. We love them.
Yep. Good dude.
But they, every one of them got it, and we can't wear them on our helmets. It's not allowed. It's against policy or whatever. But I gave everybody one to keep forever because I want them to remember that year and how magical that year was. That's the year we started the My District Mondays and all that stuff. But the start call smooth, it's important language because what does it mean? What does it mean to be smooth? Smooth is fast, but you have to be smooth first, not just flying around like a chicken with your head cut off. And so getting to the rig quick, bunking out quick, getting on scene in a safe and quick manner, being smooth. That's what it's all about. And the better you are at your job, the smoother you can be. So that's the first part, start call smooth. But the second part, and this is very applicable to what we're talking about, finish call strong. It's not just customer service and taking care of grandma or grandpa's family after we just had an EMS call, whether it be a real deal emergency where we're beating on their chest, or whether it's just somebody lost a fight with gravity and we're helping them back into the couch. No matter what one we're talking about, finishing call strong is taking care of the person that we're here for. Yeah, and then the other part of it is when that call is over, and Chris alluded to this earlier, when that call is over, taking the time in the front yard to discuss the floor plan, to discuss the tactics you would use, to discuss the man trap that you noticed that no one else noticed, to discuss the conditions that you said, hey, did you see the conditions, back there? It looks like it's a pre-hoarder house, and things like that. And just taking the times to finish the call strong. Right. And that's taking advantage of being in your own district. But I'm a huge fan of the power of language and how big of a profound effect it has on culture. And when you get that, buy-in just a little bit, it's powerful, the effect it has. Because I could tell them all day long, you're going to know building construction. But if I can get them to go out and work hard to do a presentation on it, man, I'm so far ahead of the game.
Absolutely. My last day at work, our deputy chief kind of came in and gave us there was a call that was kind of rough. And so he gave us a little pep talk. And I was on overtime, so it was a different crew. But he not as eloquently, he said the same thing, right? But the end of his thing was take care of each other. Whether it's on the call and someone steps up and says, hey, slow down. He's like the officer the guy that's riding the seat, they're a little overwhelmed with the fire. The senior guy comes up and says, I'm pulling the line. They're taking care of each other, right? But that's also at the end of the call, doing what you just said, taking 2 minutes to point out something you saw in the building. That's still taking care of each other, right? And that's all kind of part of it at the end of the day. So I like that.
Love it.
But,
love it.
So wrapping up here, I think this was an amazing discussion. Really appreciate your time in here today. Again, most people know who you are. You've got a pretty big social media presence, an awesome podcast, and everything out there that you're doing. But do you mind sharing that link or whatever your usernames that people can find you online if they have more questions, they want to check out the Firehouse Vigilance if they haven't seen it yet, all that?
Absolutely. Firehousevigilance.com is where you can find everything. Cool. Firehousevigilance.com. We're on all the socials. I try to post every day at least, but the firehousevigilance@gmail.com. If you want to email me specifically to give me any sort of, ask me a question, throw something at me, whatever. But yeah, mainly the socials are the best way. Facebook, firehousevigilance.com, Instagram, firehousevigilance.com. X, I guess it's called now. I don't know if anybody still does X.
I still call it Twitter. I can't call it that.
Too.
But
me too.
You'll be at FDIC, right?
Yes.
And what's your class called again? I'm sorry.
This one's down and dirty fireground decision making. I keep submitting different classes, but they keep taking that one, which I'm not complaining about. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, no, not at all. So for all the listeners, if you want to see him in person, definitely check him out at FDIC. and his podcast.
And in that one, I even talked about Lexi and Find the Beef, Find the Void.
Hey, there you go.
And that's something to say. You know, we appreciate it. You giving us a platform early on, back in the way backs. You know,
I think we still owe you an article
in the 2018s, back in the way backs. You know, people don't know. I don't think a lot of people realize that you were one of the first, and the way you edited and throughout our articles was awesome. By the way, like you were great before the show.
Yeah, so. we gave you an article that like was basically a Word document, and you made it pretty and put it out, and so we owe you a lot for that for sure.
No, and people need to find. I don't know where you can still find it because the Russian hackers took down the original site. Awesome. I had to rebuild. I say Rush. I don't know who did it, but it definitely got hacked and taken down. But long story short, if you can find the Main Street Firefighting articles, they are phenomenal, man. Those belong in textbooks. You guys need to publish them somewhere else so that they're out there.
Yeah, we still got one left to do. We're still
one last one. I don't think ever made it out.
Yeah, no. We're
work in progress.
We talk about that all the time because we you know how it is. Like you have like 50 projects right in the background, right?
And it's not like you've had anything else happen.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Right?
At all. Yeah, you probably hear it running around in the background, but we talk about that frequently. We're like, man, we need to write that last article. And then it just still sits there with the title, so we'll get there eventually. But
no, it's awesome.
Anyways, we appreciate your time on this holiday weekend. We hope you have a great Christmas. I'm sure we'll be talking to you before then, but you stay safe.
You guys also, thank you for this.
Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Main Street Firefighting, a podcast by Fire Engineering. We hope it was worth your time. As always, if you have questions or a topic you'd like to discuss, please reach out. Until then, stay safe and have a good night.
The Fire Store, equipping protectors with passion. Every decision the Fire Store makes as a company is about its customers. As the holiday season has quickly approached, explore a wide selection of unique and practical gifts at the Fire Store's Gift Center. Find the perfect presents for firefighters, EMTs, and first responders today. The Fire Store's goal is to get you the gear you need when you need it at prices you can afford. Visit thefirestore.com for everything but the truck and shop its family of brands including Streamlight, MSA, Lion, FLIR,